So, good morning, everyone. I'm Jacinth, and today I will be talking to you about on the topic called God and Outsiders. And even before I start speaking, let's just take a moment to bow down and pray, asking the Lord to help me speak what He wants me to speak and help us to hear what He wants us to hear. Lord, our Heavenly Father, we consider this as a privilege that we can gather in your name. We can just worship you as one body, as one church, irrespective of where we come from, Lord. And today, even as we look at this passage, even as we look at this theme to understand what your plan was for humanity in whole, Lord, I pray that you would open our eyes that we may see what you want us to see. Open our ears so that we could listen what you want us to listen, Lord. And I pray that you would touch the words that I speak this morning, Lord, amongst your people, so that truth would be revealed today, Lord, and nothing else, Father, because you are the shepherd of this church and of all of us, and may your Spirit lead us, Lord. In Jesus' most precious name I pray. Amen. So even as we worshipped this morning, and one of the things which Mahi led us to look at is that our God is a God of 1,000 generations. And though the theme for today is God and Outsiders, but I just want to do a short recap of the series that we have been going through, which is called Special Relationship with God. And in the last couple of weeks, we have looked at the covenant that God made with Noah, the covenant that God made with Abraham, with Moses, with David. And last week, Jess spoke about the broken covenant, the covenant that we broke with God because of sin. So if you look at that very closely, we will see that the covenant that God made with Noah, Abraham, Moses, and David was not just for them in their generation. And I'm not going to go through the verses, but then I would encourage you to go back and look at the book of Genesis, Genesis chapter 12, Genesis chapter 15, even the book of Samuel. And you will notice that it was centered around the nation of Israel. It was centered around, yes, God made a covenant with these leaders, with these prophets, but it was not restricted to their generation. It was God always spoke in terms of their descendants, and He chose the nation of Israel. But those covenants were not just for the nation of Israel. And it was, if we look at the Bible from a broader perspective, it starts from the creation. And the very first covenant that God made was not for Israel, but actually He made with man when He created man in His own image. Man was made for covenant communion with God in righteousness and holiness. Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 to 27 says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over the creatures that move along the ground.' So God created mankind in His own image. In the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them." And when the fall of man happened through sin, it distorted this image of God. It shattered the righteousness and holiness in which we were first made. And to restore this image is why God sent his Son, Jesus Christ, to redeem mankind and restore the image of God in true righteousness and holiness. So God's plan was not restricted to one nation or one culture or community. And as we read as James read out to us, portions from Acts chapter 10, that's actually a story of a Gentile named Cornelius. He was a centurion. That's a designation given as per the Italian regiment. And at that time, as the Romans were, ruling over the Jews, Cornelius was a Gentile. And Cornelius had a vision from God that he needs to go to Joppa and meet Peter. And while that happened, Peter was given a vision. And we didn't read out that portion, but Peter was given a vision in the form of different forms of creatures. And God showed him that when Peter was hungry, God said, "You can eat whatever is in front of you." But Peter was very reluctant. He said, "I can't have that." And God said that whatever I have made pure is pure. He had that vision, and then he gets a message that Cornelius is going to come. He needs to meet Cornelius. And when they meet, as we read, Peter understood that God was trying to make him understand that it is no longer about the borders of where we are from. And God doesn't operate in that way. And that's why in that verse he says that, can we have that verse from Acts again? Acts chapter 10, verses 27 to 28. Peter went inside, found a large gathering of people. He said to them, next verse, "You are well aware that it is against our law for a Jew to associate with or visit a Gentile. But God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean." And actually, if you look at the gospel, when Jesus was training his disciples, and when he sent out his disciples, there is a verse where actually Jesus did command that go everywhere, but do not go into Samaria or the Gentiles. Because that was a rule that Jews, the synagogue, the temples were closed for the Gentiles. The Gentiles were not allowed inside there. And Jews were not allowed to go across the borders or even associate with Gentiles. But here we see that barrier was broken, that divide was broken. And this divide was not something that was not, that came out of the blue, or it was an instant change that the Holy Spirit and God intended to happen. This was actually a plan of God from the beginning of time, from the beginning of humanity when it was created. And we see that in Isaiah chapter 49, verses 6, which says that, where it says that it is too small a thing for you to be my servant, to restore the tribes of Jacob and bring back those of Israel I have kept. I will also make you a light for the Gentiles, that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth. So it was not about just Israel. It was not just about Jews. It was for the Gentiles as well. And if we look at the word outsiders, as per the dictionary, it is termed as, we will be called outsiders if we do not belong to a place or a community, right? Like, for example, today, we have a lot of friends from different church, right? But do we call them outsiders? No, because we are part of that one church under Christ. So the word outsiders is something that we, I think, as humans, define with borders and cultures and ethnicity. But in the beginning, when God chose Israel, Israel was a nation where the nation of Jews. And although God chose Israel for the other nations, such that if we look at the lineage that came from Adam and Eve, it was a big family tree of God. We all come from a different family tree, right? We have our parents, we have our grandfathers, and then because of that bloodline, we also carry some traits. So it's very easy for us to maybe think, because of the Old Testament, that God was just God of the Jews. But he just chose the Jews to be a light to all the nations. And what we see is that gospel was not restricted to just one culture. When I was preparing for this message, I was very curious to know that if God created man in his own image, and he always wanted to be in a covenant relationship with mankind, it was not just Adam and Eve. He wanted to be in a covenant communion with all of us, then how did these Jews and Gentiles come into place? And I was reading through a lot of resources. There are 2 points of views, Some view that the separation of Jews and Gentiles occurred for the descendants of Adam and Eve. And according to this view, the chosen line of Seth, who was the son of Adam and Eve, was always separate from the rest of humanity. Therefore, Seth's descendants were considered Jews, while the rest of humanity were considered Gentiles. So if we have to go by that rule, we all are Gentiles, because we don't share that bloodline. And secondly, some view that the separation of Jews and Gentiles occurred with Abraham, when God formally chose Abraham to be the father of his chosen nation. Whatever this view is, but it is clear that there was a chosen line of ancestry that went from Adam, Eve, Seth, Noah, and then Abraham, and then the 12 sons of Jacob. Then through the reigns of all the kings of Judah, we arrive at the time of Jesus. So Jews, the line of Jews were chosen as the human line for Christ to come in. But it was not restricted to their line. And that's what God shows Peter in this passage that we see. Now, it's a fact that we all who are sitting here believe that though we are separated by culture, we may be called Gentiles, but the separation, that divide between Jews and Gentiles, was broken when Christ came, when he died for you and me, and through his blood, all of us are saved. And that's why in Romans chapter 10, verses 11 to 12, verses 10 to 13, it says, before Romans, I would like to go to Ephesians, where Ephesians chapter 2, verses 12 to 13, which says that, remember that at that time you were separated from Christ, excluded from the citizenship in Israel and foreigners to the covenants of the promise, without hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, you who once were far away have been brought near by the blood of Christ. It's the blood of Christ that unites the Jews and the Gentiles. Like, I imagine that this is God's family tree, and I want you to imagine with me, okay? It was Adam, Eve. And if sin wouldn't have come into play, all of the descendants, we all would have been called the citizens or his people. But then because sin came and it just marred the image of God, God had to choose a line to redeem the mankind. And so he chose Israel. And so the divide comes that though there are Jews, there are Gentiles, and we may fall under this category, but Christ's blood is that joint that actually joins the Jews and the Gentiles together. And that's a fact which we cannot refute. But what I wanted to focus today on is that though we know this fact, do we live as though we believe in this fact? And for that, I just wanted to use a very small example. I'm not sure how many of us over here love pets. I'm a cat lover, okay? But we don't have a cat at home because my dad's allergic to it, and even I'm allergic. But I still love cats, and I still find ways to go and admire them wherever they are. So there was this one day in our complex, there was this cute cat who just, I don't know how she found her way into our balcony. She came and she just, we've kept our washing machine, and she just found a very cozy place there in the night, and she was sleeping. And I was very, very happy. In fact, I felt honored that, wow, a cat has come into my place, because people say that more than dogs, cats are someone who have a lot of attitude. Okay, no offense to cat lovers, but I don't think that. I just think that cats, they want to earn our trust, and we need to work to have a relationship or a bond with them. So I felt really honored that, wow, this cat is here and she's sleeping in my balcony. And I was looking forward that in the morning when I wake up, I can give her something to eat or drink. But I think even before I woke up, she woke up and went wherever she wanted to go. And every day I kept waiting. I kept waiting that, okay, she'll come back today, she'll come today. She never came. It's been weeks. I'm still waiting for her. But because I love cats and I really found her very cute, I actually named her as Molly. So I keep asking, if my sister goes around, I keep asking, did you see Molly? And then one day she told me that, I was taking a walk, and do you know where your Molly was? She was gallivanting in the other complex. She's not at all loyal, and she's not interested in coming and meeting you. But that didn't change my awe for her. That didn't change my wonder for her. Because I love cats. So, and I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting that she will again one day come and sleep cozily in my balcony, and I'm okay for her to go because I just love them. And some of us adopt pets, right? And when we adopt them, when the word adopt means that they belonged to a certain family, they were a pet of a different family, or they were abandoned, so you're just bringing them into your home. And when you adopt a pet, as somebody who's passionate about that pet, you would want that the pet feels comfortable, likes you, loves you, and is around you, right? I hope it makes sense, at least to pet lovers. And if you're not a pet lover, I want to extrapolate this scenario to a family setup, okay? All of us are born, we come from parents, and even if we are related by blood and our DNA is from our parents, suppose one day our parents decided that though they were happy to have us in their home, they wanted to have another member in the family, not related by blood, but out of love and compassion. They wanted to give a home to the homeless and adopted a child. And that child comes and starts living with you in the same home. And you love that child, your parents love that child, but you observe that the adopted child doesn't feel loved. No matter how much love and compassion and care you pour out to that adopted child, the child is not able to understand the love that the parents have for her or him. And the child still feels like an outsider. My question is, if you are in that situation, observing this, will you feel for the parents or will you feel for the adopted child? What would you have told the adopted child? And when I imagine this scenario, could be an hypothetical scenario, and when we put God in the picture, when we put His people in the picture, when we put ourselves in that circle, I think it is important for us to reflect on the fact that even though He calls us His own, irrespective of whether we are Jews or not, do we live believing that we are His children? Or do we continue to live a life thinking that we're just outsiders in His kingdom? And we live as though, okay, it's like we can treat God as though we were staying in a hotel, right? When you go to a hotel, you are more concerned about the room that is being given to you. And you might just call room service when you need things. And unfortunately, sometimes we treat God like that, as though He's our room service. So we dial a prayer call when we need something, when something's not working in our lives, or when we are frustrated, just pour out all our frustration on Him and say that, God, you're not there, you're not listening, you're not, you're very silent. And we can be like those one-time visitors in the hotel, or maybe like the adopted child who is not understanding that though we were not of that bloodline, He calls us His own. We are His. And when He calls us His, the way we live, the way we see, the way we act changes. That's one point for us to reflect on. And the second thing that I wanted us to reflect on is, even if we lived as though we were His, are we too restricted in that circle that we create with God and the people with whom we interact with? For example, all of us sitting here, about 50 of us who are here, this is a safe place, and we are all bonded together by love, by Christ's love. We are all one. No matter where we come from, no matter what cultures we come from. And it's very comfortable for us to feel good in this, right? But are we open to keep the doors open for anyone who wants to be part of this kingdom? And are we open to include them in our circle? And although we feel safe in this circle, are we open to feel a little uncomfortable that a new person has come, and so that we can introduce them to the same bond, the same love that we experience to that person? One day, I clearly remember it was a Saturday, and it was a long day because we had a worship team meet, and it was a good time of fellowship that we had right from morning till almost mid-afternoon. And then after that, I knew that I had some relatives who were coming to my place around 7 p.m., but I had committed to meet 2 of my colleagues from my workplace because one of them was leaving the organization. So I told them that even though I can come and meet you for only 1 hour, but I'll still come. And though I committed, and I said yes, but I was physically and mentally a little tired after the worship fellowship that we had. And I was thinking, should I just cancel? Should I just tell them that, I can't come? Because I was anyway going to have a long evening because relatives were coming around 7 o'clock. But then something inside me just told me that just go. It's fine, you're tired, but just go. And I went there, and I had no idea what I'll talk to them, what I'll converse with them. All I knew is I'm probably going to ask them, okay, what's that girl's next step, next phase, what is she planning? And I was thinking that, okay, I'll just get to bond with them more because we are always working in a work-from-home setup. And as the conversation started, we were all sharing that, okay, what do we do apart from working in the organization that we are? And a very spontaneous answer that came from my mouth is that, well, if I'm not working, I enjoy being part of a church fellowship. And sometimes, like, there was one fellowship that I'm just coming from right now. And on Sundays we meet. And then I stopped there because they are not from the same faith. So I was a bit reluctant. I was like, okay, I don't know if they'll understand. I don't know if this is going to make sense to them. Maybe they were expecting some interesting answer, that apart from work, maybe I pursue some hobby or I do something creative. And here I am saying that I'm part of a church fellowship, and that doesn't keep, it's not that it keeps me busy, it's just that it keeps me peaceful, content, and happy. And it makes more sense to me to be part of this fellowship. So I just stopped and I thought, okay, I should not continue. And the next question they asked me was, tell us more about this church. Like, what do you all do when you meet? And I just started sharing. And from there, the conversation went into the gospel. I was not prepared for it, and this was my very first time talking about gospel to somebody from another faith. So I was saying, God, I don't know. Am I speaking the right thing? Am I speaking the things that make sense to them? But I was surprised that though I paused in between and I told them, you can stop me if you're feeling bored or if this doesn't make sense to you. They said, no, we want to hear more. We want to listen to this more. Can you just go on? Can you go on? And I went on and on, ended up talking about the entire gospel, the resurrection, and everything. And they said, when do you guys meet? Where do you guys meet? And unfortunately, she was leaving next day from Bangalore, and she said, I wish I knew this when I was in Bangalore. I would have really wanted to come and at least attend one church service with your folks. And I told her that, well, the church is always open. Whenever you come down to Bangalore, you can always come and you can always tell me. That day was an eye-opener for me, actually. That day I realized that, and it was just 1 hour. I was on a timer, okay? And I was thinking, in that 1 hour, what bond am I going to make with them? But that 1 hour God used so beautifully to show me, actually, that you think that the gospel won't make sense. But the truth is, we just have to step out, and the rest God does. And I think the reason the gospel really struck a chord with them is because if we go back to creation, the way God created man and woman, He imprinted His character into us. He imprinted His character of righteousness and holiness into us. The morality, the moral values that we talk about, that was God who gave us. That the thing that when, we call human beings as social, some term it as that human beings are social animals. So when COVID hit, all of us struggled because all of us wanted a community. We wanted communion. Where does that come from? It comes right from the beginning because we were created for communion with God and people. And that is there within our hearts. But that vision, the ability to see that got distorted with sin. But it doesn't change the fact that God is not interested in what we do for Him, how we do for Him, where we are coming from. I mean, today I'm here standing and sharing a message with all of you. I cannot consider myself holier than any one of you just because I'm preaching here. Because if I go back and lead a life that is not acceptable in His sight, and when my life is not a testimony acceptable in His sight and to other people, what I'm doing here is of no use. Because I will be judged for what I do inside the closed doors, not what I'm doing here. And same goes for all of us. It's not the origin, it's the heart that God is interested in. And when we look at Romans chapter 2, verse 14 to 15, that was read to us by James, I want us to look at it once again. It says that, indeed, when Gentiles who do not have the law do by nature things required by the law, they are a law for themselves, even though they do not have the law. They show that the requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciousness also bearing witness, and their thoughts sometimes accusing them, and at other times even defending them. And Romans chapter 10, verses 14 to 15 says, how then can they call on the one they have not believed in? How then can they believe in the one of whom they have not heard? How can they hear without someone preaching to them? And how can anyone preach unless they are sent? As it is written, how beautiful are the feet of those who bring you good news. There was a song I learned in Sunday school which said that, how will the people know unless we show them? You and I got to have a heart to change the world. That was a song which I learned when I was in Sunday school, and I remembered this as I was preparing, that how will they know unless we show them? So 2 things for us to take back today, even as we go into a time of communion, a time where we reflect on our life, where we, come with a humble heart to God, that to confess if we have done anything wrong. What I would invite all of you to do as we go into this moment of communion and confession is to first reflect and ask, are we living life as outsiders even when God calls us his own? And second, have we closed the door for someone who might have wanted to come in and share in the circle that we are? We have the privilege of sharing with God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Cornelius was a Gentile. If you read I would encourage you to actually go and read that entire chapter. I love that story, because Cornelius was the first Gentile who accepted Christ and understood the good news. He was, if you read introduction about him, he was a God-fearing man who gave to the needy, and God saw that. And then God gave him a vision. God spoke to him in a dream. That is our God, sovereign God, who doesn't care where we are from. All he cares is our heart. Where is it? Where is our heart? Is our heart with him? Do we want to be in communion with him? When Jesus sat for the Last Supper before he was going to be crucified with his disciples, there was Judas also in that. Jesus knew Judas is going to betray him, but he still had communion with him, because the gospel was for someone like Judas as well. So I hope we are able to live as children of God and not as adopted children of God who think that, this is just we're not his. And I hope we are able to break open our safe circles and allow someone to come in to experience this inheritance that we have got through Christ. And I'll just call Steve now to lead us into a time of prayer and communion, so that this that we heard just now becomes a better reality for us.